I think that by now it's pretty common knowledge that YouTube videos and transcripts are being used to train. And what does that mean to the creators? Who knows? Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Show, the podcast that helps your business grow smarter by making AI approachable and actionable. My name is Paul Raitzer. I'm the founder and CEO of Marketing AI Institute, and I'm your host. Each week, I'm joined by my co-host and Marketing AI Institute Chief Content Officer, Mike Kaput, as we break down all the AI news that matters and give you insights and perspectives that you can use to advance your company and your career. Join us as we accelerate AI literacy for all. Welcome to episode 106 of the Artificial Intelligence Show. I'm your host, Paul Raitzer, along with my co-host, Mike Kaput. We have some fascinating topics this week. I actually had some fun prepping for this one this morning. There was some where I kind of dug back into some history, some articles I hadn't read in a few years, to give some context to some of the big topics we're going to talk about today. So excited to get into it. There's potentially some big news coming out this week, maybe a new AI model coming out very soon we'll talk about. But this week's episode is brought to us by the Marketing AI Conference, or MAICON. The 5th annual event is happening in Cleveland, September 10th to the 12th. It's coming up really fast. A good part of my summer is dedicated to finalizing this agenda and preparing for all the different sessions and everything we got going on at the event. There's going to be more than 60 sessions, by far our biggest event yet. Last year, we had about 700 attendees. This year, we're trending toward 1,500. There's going to be amazing keynotes. We have 10 general sessions, featured talks, one from Mike Walsh, who Mike and I have both read. He's the author of The Algorithmic Leader. It was one of the more influential AI books in kind of the early days of the Institute and our thinking around AI and the potential for it. So day one's going to close with a keynote from Mike Walsh. I can't wait for that one. We have Andrew Davis, our good friend Andrew Davis, doing the digital doppelganger. It's an amazing talk. I've seen it like 3 times and it changes every time. But he's going to be right after my opening keynote on the AI timeline, sort of road to AGI, what comes next. Andrew is going to bring an insane amount of energy, as he always does. We have Liz Grennan, partner at Quantum Black, AI by McKinsey. She's going to be talking about digital trust and the trust economy and AI. And just an amazing list of speakers. So go check it out. It's maicon.ai, so MAICON.ai. Early bird pricing ends this Friday. So that's July 26th, Mike, I think?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Yeah, so July 26th is the last chance to get the early bird pricing. You can get an additional $100 off any of the passes with POD100 promo code. And then if you're bringing a group of 5 or more, we actually have a promotion going where you can get our Scaling AI on-demand series for everyone that registers. Again, that's for groups of 5 or more. They'll get instant access or near instant access to the Scaling AI 10-course series, so you can accelerate AI learning now and then get in person at MAICON in September. So we would love to have you there. Again, it's MAICON, MAICON.ai. And don't forget to use that POD100 promo code to get $100 off, in addition to the final early bird pricing that ends on Friday. Okay. AI adoption in the enterprise, Mike. We've got an interesting case study, I guess, going on here.
Yeah, for sure. So this past week, the information seems to have kind of gotten a reality check on the current state of AI adoption in enterprises. Now, they just did a recent conversation with Chevron's Chief Information Officer, Bill Braun, and they talked to him about how the company is using AI. And kind of surprisingly, in that conversation, Braun said that despite Chevron creating an enterprise AI team last summer to find valuable AI applications, he isn't yet convinced that large language models will significantly transform Chevron's business or boost employee productivity enough to justify the costs. Braun also indicated that about 20,000 employees are testing Microsoft Copilot But he said, quote, "The jury is still out on whether it's helpful enough to staff to justify the cost." The company is also using an internal chatbot to help find company knowledge across departments. Braun further went on to say, quote, "We're a little dissatisfied with our ability to know how well it's working. We have to survey employees a lot, which isn't our favorite thing to do, but we're giving Microsoft a lot of feedback and they're trying to help figure it out because they know they need to." He also noted that Chevron, while they are increasing their cloud spend, they're not doing it because of AI. They're rather just going through more of moving their computing workloads to the cloud. So, Paul, kind of an interesting angle here, one we don't always hear about. And you had posted about this on LinkedIn, kind of pointing out maybe a larger consideration here. And you wrote, quote, "As a reminder, the cost of a Copilot license is about $30 per user per month, though they probably pay less with that many licenses if they're, using it with 20,000 people. Here's my opinion on this. If a company can't justify $30 for Copilot or ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude, then it is more likely due to a lack of education, training, and planning than it is to a deficiency in the AI's capabilities. This is both a challenge for the company licensing the technology and a weakness in how the AI tech companies are selling and supporting the platform." So, Paul, I guess given that commentary, maybe could you walk us through what you see as the possible problem here, both with the Chevron case study specifically, but also more generally with enterprises, and also kind of what should we do about it?
We keep hearing about this lack of value or this uncertainty of value created, and I think the media. I don't blame the media for running with these stories because it's the majority of the stories that are out there is,
Hmm.
these organizations and again, like the information article doesn't explicitly state that they didn't have an onboarding plan or they didn't do education and training around how to get value out of Copilot. They didn't help people find use cases, things like that. But you can certainly make that assumption that is probably the case because it's what we keep hearing over and over again. So you hear these stories about not sure if we're getting value. Now, 20,000 licenses is a lot. I don't blame them for wanting value. I didn't do the math in my head, but that's probably, I mean, what, at least a couple million a month in
Hmm.
licenses, I think. Um, so it's not insignificant. And I could imagine the CFO is putting some pressure on saying, are we actually getting any value here? Are we increasing productivity? Are we saving costs? Like, are we driving revenue? Like, what is the value? So what we see time and time again is companies buy the licenses. And it's not unheard of that it's thousands of licenses and not just Copilot, might be ChatGPT, possibly Gemini, but they're buying all of these licenses. Then they either give access to a small group of people or they just turn them on for everybody. And then they just assume people are going to figure this out, that they're going to find the value themselves. They're going to discover these use cases and then, 3 months later, 6 months later, the CFO comes in or the earnings call happens and there's pressure to like figure out where to cut costs. And you go look at the line item for Gen AI and it's like, well, are we even getting anything out of it? Now, all the while, the people that are deciding whether or not we're getting anything out of this or whether or not it's worth the budget may not even understand AI. So
Hmm.
they're just like, and so, when I first read this article, that was what came to my mind was like, man, this is exactly what we see every time we talk to big enterprises. And even small businesses too. Like we're guilty of this at times. Like we have ChatGPT, we have Claude, we have Gemini, we have all of them, and we haven't even done this, but we're a little different in that everyone in our team kind of knows what they're doing, knows the use cases. Like we trust that they can get the value, and we don't really
Hmm.
think too deeply about it. But even in a small business, like when I was running our agency, like I sold in 2021, but was about 20 people. And I could imagine that feeling of like, wow, we're paying $30 a month for 20 people. Like as a small business, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So to your question, what do you do about this? And so, I was reading this, I'm like, all right, just like real quick framework, like kind of off the top of my head, I put these 5 things on LinkedIn and it seemed to resonate with people because last I looked at like 25,000 impressions on this post and over 320 engagements. So it definitely like resonated with people. So the 5 things I outlined for any size business Number one, pilot with small groups in select departments over a 90-day period. Prove the value and create internal user champions, then scale it. So buying 20,000 licenses probably isn't the right call.
Mm,
Buying 10 or 20 or 100 and making sure you have a very specific group of people who have a responsibility, a KPI, an OKR, like whatever you want to call it, for 90 days to prove the value. So you're going to do this, and then if it works, now you go buy the 20,000 licenses or 10,000 or whatever you do. But we've seen time and again, these big enterprises get whatever reason, they just buy into these massive packages and buy all the licenses at once with no plan of what they're going to do with them. The second thing, and this is really critical, is to prioritize use cases specific to employee roles and responsibilities. So don't just give them Copilot and say, yeah, it's got email writing assistance and it's got to help me write thing in docs and it can maybe help create some images in PowerPoint. Like, don't just rely on the obvious use cases that are being sold with the tech companies, what they're positioning it as. Think about the individual person's role, the tasks that they do in their job, and then assess the value of AI at that task level. And then pick 3 to 5 use cases initially for each person that will have an immediate and measurable impact. So, this is what you and I do all the time, Mike. It's like, okay,
yeah.
what are the campaigns we run? Like, the podcast as an example. What are the tasks that we're doing over and over again? And then let's make sure we're infusing these platforms into those core things. Now, if we find other use case along the way, great. But if all we do is these three to five things every week with this tool, it pays for itself 10 times over in a
Mhm.
month. And that's like, so when I look at these, like, how can you not get $30 worth of value out of this power? Like, if you just took 10 minutes to look at the tasks you do in your job and picked 3 to 5 things these things can help with, there is no way you're not saving at least an hour each week, if not each month. Like, that's nuts. Um, so that's the other thing. So small group and give them very specific use cases. Help them figure out the ways to get value. The third is, and extremely critical, and we talked in depth about this on last week's podcast, episode 105,
Mm,
provide generative AI education and training to maximize the value. But don't just do general training, like tailor learning journeys for individuals, including specific coursework and experiences in the core platforms. So help them figure out how to use these tools specific to what they do. Um, you and I have a webinar on Thursday, July 25th. We're going to introduce the State of Marketing AI research findings for 2024. I know we talked a little bit about that last week, but two of the key findings we're going to go through: 75% of respondents, employers, do not have internal AI-focused education and training. We asked that question specifically. And the second, when we asked about barriers to adoption in their organization and their marketing, 67% said lack of education and training is the top barrier to adoption of AI. And that is for, 4 straight years. Education and training has been the number one barrier people identify. We give them like 15 choices.
yeah.
So we know that education and training is an issue, and these organizations have to provide that. And you can't rely on the tech companies to do it. Like, I don't think Google and Microsoft and OpenAI and Anthropic can be expected at this point in their life cycle of AI to deliver all the education and training you need. And honestly, when they do, it's often too product specific and not, general enough overall.
Yeah.
For monitored utilization, this is a little hard one, and I actually appreciated the point the CIO made in the information article about utilization. It's kind of hard. Like, they've been providing feedback to Microsoft, like, hey, we need more tools, more analytics to know how it's being utilized.
Mm,
But you need to find ways to monitor whether or not the people you're providing these licenses to on your team are actually using the technology. And then invest in the employees who are actually experimenting and finding value in them, and remove the licenses from the employees that aren't using them. So we've seen this a lot where you assign 100 licenses, say, to ChatGPT or Microsoft, and maybe 10 of the people who have those licenses are actually using them for anything other than rewriting your emails or writing drafts of documents. Those aren't your power users. Those aren't the people that are going to find value and help others along. So utilization is key. And then reporting performance benchmarks. And so what we mean by that is once you know like the 3 to 5 things that someone's going to use it for, have them do a report of, okay, I'm going to use it to help me in writing articles, developing video scripts, and producing the podcast each week. Okay, great. Create a task list for each of those things, and then do an estimate of how much time you're currently spending to do those. And then we're going to, at 30, 60, 90 days, we're going to assess how that's changed based on your utilization of these models. And then you just have a very cut and dry report. It's like, it's transparent. This is what we were doing before. This is what it looks like now. So by doing that, you're able to then directly prove the value. So these 5 steps, and again, I'll just recap them: pilot with a small group, prioritize use cases, provide education and training for generative AI specific to the tool you're bringing in, monitor utilization, and report performance versus benchmark. So in short, what I said on LinkedIn is have a plan. Like, the
Yeah.
value is absolutely there if it's rolled out in a strategic way and as part of a larger change management plan, not a technology solution we just bought and we gave to everybody. So as a quick reminder, I mean, this is what we do. So like SmarterX, Marketing Institute, it's all about helping people develop learning journeys to, provide this education and training, help people on like a pursuit to mastery of AI. And so there's 3 things I'll recommend. So one, I teach a free monthly intro to AI class on Zoom. It's had over 25,000 people go to it. We're going to do episode or session 40, I think, in August.
Yep.
That's intro2ai.co, intro2ai.co. It is free. It's a 30-minute class with 30 minutes of Q&A every month. So that's a great way to do intro. We have Piloting AI, which Mike and I have created now 2 years in a row. This version was released in late January 2024. It's 18 on-demand courses that's meant as a step-by-step learning path for beginners at all levels. While it's tailored to marketers, a lot of the focus of the middle courses in that series is specific to marketing use cases. It is broadly applicable to any knowledge worker that wants to understand how to pilot AI. We teach how to prioritize use cases and how to adopt this technology. So that's about 9 hours of content with a professional certificate. That's pilotingai.com. You can go learn more about that. And then just in June of this year, we launched Scaling AI, which is sort of the next step. So again, intro, piloting, scaling. It's all designed as a learning journey. That's 10 on-demand courses for business leaders, not marketing specific. It is for business leaders. Director level and above is kind of how we think about it. And that is about 6 hours of content and walks through how to build an AI academy, like the education training, how to develop an AI council, generate AI policies, responsible AI principles, how to conduct impact assessments on your team, your partners, your tech stack, and how to build an AI roadmap. So that's scalingai.com. So again, intro to AI is www.intro2ai.co, pilotingai.com, scalingai.com. So if you want to accelerate education, those are the 3 key components that we offer to help people in this area.
All right. So another big topic this week, OpenAI has unveiled GPT-4o Mini, which is their most cost-efficient small model to date. So GPT-4o Mini boasts some pretty impressive capabilities. It scored 82% on the MMLU benchmark, which measures textual intelligence and reasoning. And it actually, they are saying, outperforms GPT-4 on chat preferences on the LM-SIS leaderboard. Now, the big thing to note here is the cost. GPT-4o Mini is priced at just 15 cents per million input tokens and 60 cents per million output tokens. So this makes it an order of magnitude more affordable than previous frontier models, and it's over 60% cheaper than GPT 3.5 Turbo. Now, GPT-4o Mini also supports both text and vision inputs in its API. There are plans to expand to audio and video in the future. It has a substantial context window of 128,000 tokens and can handle up to 16,000 output tokens per request. And in benchmark tests, GPT-4o Mini outperforms other small models like Gemini Flash and Claude Haiku across certain tasks like math, coding, and multimodal reasoning. Now, right now, GPT-4o Mini is accessible through OpenAI's APIs, and it is going to be replacing GPT 3.5 for ChatGPT users across free, plus, and team tiers. So, Paul, first up, let's kind of talk about this announcement specifically. What does this mean for businesses using ChatGPT or building on it?
So in the intelligence rises, costs fall is kind of like the high level here. They're getting smarter, but they're getting smaller, faster, more cost efficient, and that opens up the ability to build intelligence. So to rewind back to episode 87, where we talked about this potential AI timeline, I'll just pull a couple of excerpts from that. So I had written, the 2024 to 2030, sort of this road to AGI. The first bullet under 2024 is continued advancements and potential leaps in multimodal reasoning, planning, decisioning, expanded context windows, memory, personalization, reliability, accuracy. Then when you look into 2025 to 2026, which I headlined Multimodal AI Explosion, large language models built multimodal from the ground up, which is kind of what we're hearing here, but with video and audio, not just text and image. Frontier models become 10 to 100 times more powerful and generally capable. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But here's the key one. Smaller, faster, more efficient models enable vast applications on device, phones, earbuds, watches, possibly wearables. And then synthetic data is a key one to come back to. So at this point, I put synthetic data potentially becomes the dominant source of vision training, but also, as we learn, plays a key role in training the big frontier models. So I want to jump over to Andrej Karpathy, who we talk about all the time, legendary AI researcher, ran AI at Tesla for 5 years, a couple of stints at OpenAI. We'll actually talk in a few minutes about Andrej's new initiative. But he tweeted when this model came out, this is July 18th, large language model size competition is intensifying backwards. My bet is that we'll see models that think very well and reliably that are very, very small. There is most likely a setting, even in GPT-2 parameters, so we're talking a couple generations ago, for which most people will consider GPT-2 smart. The reason current models are so large is because we're still being very wasteful during training. We're asking them to memorize the internet, and remarkably, they do and can recite complex things. But imagine if you were going to be tested closed book on reciting arbitrary passages of the internet given the first few words. This is the standard pre-training objective for models today. The reason doing better is hard is because demonstrations of thinking are entangled with knowledge in the training data. Therefore, the models have to first get larger before they can get smaller, because we need their automated help to refactor and mold the training data into ideal synthetic formats. So in essence, he's saying, like, by making them bigger, we can now make them smaller. And then by making them smaller, we can actually make them bigger because we can now create synthetic data that can be used to train the bigger model. He goes on to give an analogy of Tesla and their full self-driving that I found kind of fascinating as well. ChatGPT, so if you don't follow ChatGPT, it has its own Twitter account, and it tweeted, pushing the limits of intelligence we can serve for free is part of the quest to make sure AGI benefits all of humanity. So the cost reduction not only has practical application to businesses, it has a broader application to this pursuit of AGI and making it readily available. Sam Altman also tweeted, towards intelligence too cheap to meter. Way back in 2022, the best model in the world was Text DaVinci 003, which was available in their playground. I remember, using that before ChatGPT came out. It was much, much worse than this new model. It cost 100 times more. So just 2 years ago, the best model in the world cost 100 times more than this new model and was nowhere near its capability. So the rate of change, again, is so complicated to understand and process. But long story short, AI gets smaller and cheaper, drives access to it, and accelerates innovation because now startups who build on the APIs can innovate faster. They can build tools that are more practical to different industries. And it drives disruption faster because intelligence becomes cheaper and it potentially accelerates the impact on the knowledge workforce that we've talked about. So, it's the bigger models are getting bigger and more generally capable, and the smaller models are achieving performance outputs and capabilities that a year ago was what the most advanced frontier models did. And this is the cycle we're going to be in. They're going to keep getting bigger and they're going to keep getting smaller. And that's a weird dynamic to be planning for the future. And when intelligence seems to be everywhere and the cost of it is dramatically plummeting.
This is really good timing too with last week's topic around
Yeah.
the Carl Schulman podcast, which I'm sure for some people it just seemed like so future looking, but this is the cycle it seems he's talking about. When intelligence that is good enough gets cheap enough, it unlocks all sorts of kind of exponential or runaway improvements in what's possible. Is that kind of how you're looking at this?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a good call to, like, if you didn't listen to last week's podcast, I would go listen to it. I think that it's helpful context. And then, like, I was trying to, I was like, was 1969, the Apollo mission goes to the moon. And I was
Hmm.
thinking back to, because it was in July of 69. So, anniversary week, or right around the anniversary. And I was remembering back to the stories of how the computer, the supercomputer, quote unquote, of that time is nowhere near the capabilities of we now have in our pockets with the iPhone. And just that idea, now that was over an extended period of time. We're talking about decades of innovation to lead to the shrinking of compute capability into our pocket. But that's in essence what's now happening every like 12 to 24 months is this like doubling, tripling, 10xing of intelligence to where that's what these models are going to feel like. It's kind of like what Sam was saying with that text Da Vinci in 2022
Mm.
was 100 times more expensive than what we have now. And just keep playing that out, as Schulman said, like just play this out. And even Leopold, when we talked about situational awareness a few episodes ago, just play this out over every like 1 to 2 years and assume a 10 to 100 time increase in intelligence and a 10 to 100 times reduction in cost of intelligence. There's no end in sight to that. And that's why, we talk about this idea of an exponential, like it's really hard for our minds to comprehend 2 years from now if we look back and say, "Oh, remember when they introduced 4o mini and it was 100 times cheaper than," and now we have like 6o mini and it's 100 times cheaper. Like that's where this is all going. And then, yeah, Schulman's point was what happens when this occurs? Like this is the future that is predictable right now. And no one seems to be planning for it other
Hmm.
than OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Anthropic.
Yeah. All right. Our third kind of main topic this week is that some new research has come out on prompting that is making some waves in the AI community. So, this research comes from an AI education company called Learn Prompting and researchers at OpenAI, Microsoft, Stanford, and a handful of other leading educational institutions. This research is called the Prompt Report, and over 76 pages, it surveys 1,500 papers on prompting and looks at over 200 different prompting techniques. Now, unfortunately, the research doesn't have the full gospel truth on kind of which prompt is always the best or how to always increase prompt performance. However, it did find that right now, few shot prompting, as in providing at least a few examples when you prompt, using chain of thought reasoning, where you encourage the model to show its reasoning step by step, that can perform the best in the limited tests the researchers did. Though they do emphasize that much more research into actual prompt performance needs to be done, and performance significantly varies depending on the task or the model. However, in a related interview about the report, Sander Schulhoff, who is the founder and CEO of Learn Prompting, gave 6 pieces of advice to improve the results you get from few shot prompting. And these are pretty helpful if you're doing any type of prompting along the lines of the marketing and business use cases we talk about all the time on the podcast. So, just very quickly, he says generally, including more exemplars, that's kind of the fancy term they use for well-selected examples of what you're trying to do. More examples typically improves performance. Again, not always. It's A little bit art, little bit of science. Randomly ordering your examples can, in some cases, help because it reduces the tendency of the model to bias towards certain ones. For instance, if you were showing it both positive and negative examples of the outcome you want, actually grouping those by positive and negative could force it to be biased towards one or the other. You definitely want a balanced representation of the different outcomes you're trying to achieve with your examples. You want to label them as correctly as possible. You want to choose a common, consistent format for your examples. And finally, when possible, you want to use examples that are similar to the test instance you're asking about. So basically making your examples very close to what you're trying to do can help you improve performance. Now, if you fail to do all these things, it's not like your prompt is going to totally fail. This is just a way to get some better results. So, Paul, this certainly so far as I've seen looks like the most comprehensive review yet of kind of the literature out there on prompting, possible ways to prompt better. Like, what did you take away from this report?
I thought it was great. One takeaway for people is the models are weird. Like we still don't really know why they work. Like some of the leading researchers continue to be surprised that you can just give these models all this data and they somehow make all these predictions about the next token or word in the sequence, and they do it in this really comprehensive and intelligent way. So we have to realize that this is all still pretty new. Like us humans interacting with these machines and learning how to talk to them. It's still pretty new. It does demonstrate that prompting ability still matters. So while I am a big believer that eventually it becomes less and less important for the average knowledge worker to be able to prompt this way, right now it is still highly relevant. It is a differentiator. It's a competitive advantage to be able to talk to the machine and get a better output from it. I think this demonstrates the importance of onboarding, education, and training that we just talked about with the Chevron example.
Yeah.
So imagine day one, you're a Chevron employee or brand X, whatever the company is, and you are given a license to Copilot or Gemini or Anthropic Claude or ChatGPT Team or whatever it is. And day one with that license, you have a 1-hour training course. That 1-hour training course synthesizes how to prompt the machine. And it gives you 10, 15, 20 examples relevant to your daily workflow of how to craft prompt. You cannot tell me greater value won't be unlocked from those platforms if training like this was provided to people. So I think that by reviewing this document, you realize there is an art and a science to this. And if we give that knowledge and capability to people who have these tools, you're going to unlock greater value from them. The other thing I would note is I didn't read the entire document, but I spent a good amount of time going through it. My overall thought is it's not overly technical. Like I wouldn't be intimidated for anyone who's interested in this to go read it. Now there is technical aspects to it. I would consider it probably intermediate level education. But you can definitely get through it and take a lot of learnings away from it and even skim past the overly technical stuff and just zero in on some of the key takeaways that you already highlighted, Mike. The other thing I will say is if you take the 30 to 60 minutes to read and understand this report, you're going to be ahead of 99.5 to 99.9% of the professionals in your field. So if you can understand this and apply it, and if you're an attorney or an accountant or an HR professional or a CEO or a marketer or a salesperson or a customer service rep, whatever it is you do, if you can understand this and apply it to your use of these technologies, you're going to be ahead of everyone in your field, basically. And that's very powerful. Like as you're looking at your career potential and the value you can create in your organization, something like this is time really well spent to understand the fundamentals. Like even when they just break down the components of a prompt into giving it a directive, giving it examples, telling it the format you want in the output, giving it instructions on style, giving it a role, like what is it supposed to be? And then providing any additional context. Like if you just do those things, then you can be way ahead. The other thing I'll say, and we talked about this on some recent episodes, is if you're using Anthropic or Google or ChatGPT or Runway for video, search for, and we'll put them in the links, the prompting guides provided by those organizations. So
Mm.
while there are universals that do seem to work across models because they're generally trained on similar or the same data in many cases, so the prompting styles seem to kind of work across models, there are nuances to them. So go read the Anthropic prompt library. Look at their, Sheets prompting tutorial. Go to Google Gemini and get their prompting guide on a quick start handbook for effective prompts. Read the runway guide. Like, there are some resources provided. And then the last thing, and again, Mike and I try and avoid the podcast being promotional, like outside of the upfront, like promo for, something we do at the Institute. We don't really talk too much about what we provide. But we did actually recently introduce a prompting for professionals workshop for this specific reason, because that was the number one thing we kept hearing from people is we don't know what to do. We don't know how to guide our team. So we actually offer a new workshop where we'll go in and teach people the art and science of prompting, create a collection of template prompts that teams can use to immediately apply to their workflows. But you don't have to use us. Like, you can go to smarterx.ai and learn more, click on workshops, and you can learn more about it. But there's tons of resources out there for this stuff. Just find people you trust who can help you with prompting and give it a go. Like, even if it's a free resource or reading these guides, but there are also professional solutions like Mike and I would offer through workshops. But find people who can help you do this if you don't have the time to do it yourself, because this is very valuable to your team.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. After having gone through this entire report, I've already got to-dos listed out to go through it a second and third time, because it is, like you said, the highest, I think, value use of your time in terms of what you get in terms of ROI. Because in all the workshops and engagements that we do, I can tell you I don't see 99% of people getting anywhere close to doing prompting as well as you can do it after reading this report.
Yep. Yeah. And the other thing I'll tell you, and Mike, I know you've done this, go build like a GPT in ChatGPT, or go build a project in Anthropic and experiment with variations of the prompt, like these different
Yeah.
components they take. It is shocking sometimes how talking to the model differently, like the prompt you provide, the system prompt, how it affects the output. And it's 100% true that examples are critical. Like, I have built a GPT where I didn't have examples, and then I said, no, I want it to be like this, and boom, it nails it. And then it
Yeah.
improves the example I gave it. So we say this all the time, you have to experiment with these things. You cannot just go in and click the help me write button in Gemini or in Copilot and think you're going to get value, or take an email and say, change the tone to be, more professional. That is like so surface level right now. And that, again, is the fault of the technology companies selling the stuff, that they're not, really teaching you how to prompt in ways that matter to you. And the companies that are enabling these licenses at $30 per user per month and then questioning the value.
Right.
Just do the basics, like have a plan, teach them how to prompt, give them use cases.
All right, let's dive into a bunch of rapid fire topics for this week. So first up is that OpenAI is reportedly working on a secretive AI project codenamed Strawberry. This information comes from an internal document that was reviewed by Reuters and someone who is familiar with the matter that they interviewed. Strawberry appears to be a novel approach to AI models aimed at dramatically improving their reasoning capabilities. The project's goal is to enable AI to plan ahead and navigate the internet autonomously to perform what OpenAI calls, quote, deep research. Now, details about how all this works and what this is are really, really light. Like, we don't have a ton right now. But Paul, seems like pretty big news. Is this GPT-5 an important component of it? What's going on?
So sometimes prepping for this podcast is a lot of fun. And this was one where it was probably a little too much fun for me this morning. So a couple of things of context here. One, this seems to possibly related to the Q-Star news from fall of 2023, when Sam was temporarily ousted as CEO of OpenAI. And there was this rumors swirling around Q-Star and these advancements in reasoning. It seems like this may be a continuation of that, possibly under a different code name or something. So my immediate takeaway is more innovation is definitely coming, whether this is part of GPT-5 or it's, going to be something in the future. It's coming.
Yeah.
But the part I thought was hilarious is the code name, Strawberry. It's like, what the heck does strawberry have to do with anything? And I don't remember if I saw a tweet about this. Like, I don't remember how I ended up going down this path, but it appeared as though it might be an effort by OpenAI to troll Elon Musk. So, as we'll recall from many past episodes, Elon and Sam Altman are not the biggest fans of each other. Specifically, Elon is not a fan of OpenAI, and Sam Altman. Quick recap: Elon puts $40 million in to start OpenAI, creates the name OpenAI. Him and Sam and a few others build OpenAI as the counterpunch to Google and their pursuit of AGI. Sam and Elon have a falling out in 2019. Elon exits OpenAI, and now he is obviously doing all the things he's doing, including XAI, to compete with OpenAI. Okay, if that's all new to you, I apologize. We'll go back to a few episodes and catch up. Okay, so now the strawberry trolling possibility. So in 2017, April 2017, interview was conducted in March of 2017 in Vanity Fair. So this is a couple months before the Transformer paper. So before Attention is All You Need paper comes from Google Brain, the invention of the Transformer that leads to the building of GPT. So we are about 3 to 4 months prior to the publishing of Attention is All You Need in spring 2017. The title of the Vanity Fair, now Elon and Sam are still boys at this point, fresh, building OpenAI a year into it. The headline is Elon Musk's billion-dollar crusade to stop the AI apocalypse. The lead to the story: Elon Musk is famous for his futuristic gambles, but Silicon Valley's latest rush to embrace AI scares him, and he thinks you should be frightened too. Inside his efforts to influence the rapidly advancing field and its proponents, and to save humanity from machine learning overlords. It talks about Musk and Demis Hassabis meeting. Again, we're back in early days, 2015, 16, 17, at SpaceX, and they're talking about Musk's goals to colonize Mars. And Hassabis replies, Demis Hassabis, the CEO of Google DeepMind, replied, in fact, he was working on the most important project in the world, developing artificial superintelligence. Musk countered that this was one reason we needed to colonize Mars, so that we'll have a bolt hole. I don't know what a bolt hole is. If AI goes rogue and turns on humanity. Amused, Hassabis said that AI would simply follow humans to Mars. The article goes on to say the field of AI is rapidly developing, but still far from the powerful, self-evolving software that haunts Musk. Facebook uses AI to target advertising, photo tagging, and curated news feeds. Microsoft and Apple use AI to power their digital assistants, Cortana and Siri. Google's search engine from the beginning has been dependent on AI. All of these small advances are part of the chase to eventually create flexible, self-teaching AI that will mirror human learning. There's some very important words being used here. Other quick context: this is about a year after I started Marketing AI Institute. So we were deep in AI research by this time, following very closely along with Demis and Elon and Sam and others. Article goes on to say, again, spring 2017. Before DeepMind was gobbled up by Google in 2014 as part of its AI shopping spree, Musk had been an investor in the company, in DeepMind. With Demis. He told me that his involvement was not about a return on his money, but rather to keep a wary eye on the arc of AI. Quote, it gave me more visibility into the rate at which things were improving, and I think they're really improving at an accelerating rate far faster than people realize. Musk warned that they could be creating the means of their own destruction. He told Bloomberg's Ashley Vance, who just last week launched a HBO show about space exploration, which I have to watch. Sounds awesome. So he told Ashley Vance, the author of the biography Elon Musk, that he was afraid that his friend Larry Page, a co-founder of Google and now CEO of its parent company Alphabet, no longer, but at that time, could have perfectly good intentions, but still, quote, produce something evil by accident, including possibly, quote, a fleet of artificial intelligence enhanced robots capable of destroying mankind. So again, 2017, Elon Musk is pushing this idea that we may accidentally create robots that destroy mankind. The author also spoke with Eliezer Yudikowsky, who we've talked about on the show before, who stated, "The AI doesn't have to take over the whole internet. It doesn't need drones. It's not dangerous because it has guns. It's dangerous because it's smarter than us. It's impossible," this is Eliza still, "impossible for me to predict exactly how we'd lose because the AI will be smarter than I am. When you're building something smarter than you have to get it right on the first try." This is an inside look at the doomers' perspective going back to 2017. So now here is the strawberry thing. So the author says, I'm thinking back after I talked to Eliza about my conversations with Elon and Sam, and this is what Elon told her in explaining the potential for AI to take over and destroy mankind. Let's say, this is a quote from Elon, let's say you create a self-improving AI to pick strawberries, and it gets better and better at picking strawberries and picks more and more, and it is self-improving. So all it really wants to do is pick strawberries. So then it would have all the world be strawberry fields forever, and there would be no room for human beings. So I don't know for a fact that this is the origin of it, but it's possible, and I would not put it past them, that Sam and OpenAI are simply trolling Elon Musk for this strawberry quote. But the key here, and this is what I think is very important, if you go back to that quote, picking strawberries and picks more and more, and it is self-improving. We know self-improving is critical. We talked about that on I think it was episode 105, where we talked about advancements that were potentially the foundation of self-improvement. Andrej Karpathy talked about self-improvement as a goal of all AI research labs right now. And so I think that strawberry may actually be a hint at a way for reasoning, but also for self-improvement of Altman tried to capture, again, going back to the Vanity Fair article, the chilling grandeur of what's at stake. This is from the article. Quote, "It's a very exciting time to be alive because in the next few decades, we are either going to head towards self-destruction or toward human descendants eventually colonizing the universe." Now, I will wrap up this segment because this was supposed to be a rapid fire item, but I get a little carried away. This morning, Elon Musk tweets, "Nice work by XAI team, X team, NVIDIA, and supporting companies getting Memphis supercluster training started at 4:20 a.m. local time. With 100,000 liquid-cooled H100s on a single RDMA fabric, it's the most powerful AI training cluster in the world. This is a significant advantage in training the world's most powerful AI by every metric by December of this year." Then Ahmad Mustaq, the former CEO of Stability AI, who was, well, I was going to say ousted, who left the company a couple months ago, replied, "Likely to be the fastest supercomputer in the world at 2.5 exaflops. The current fastest is Frontier at 1.2 exaflops, then Aurora at 1. With latest advances, could train GPT-4 in about a week." So Elon Musk in 2017 is worried about the destruction of humanity and the strawberry fields taking over the world, leaves OpenAI, and now apparently has built the largest supercluster in the world of NVIDIA chips and has the most powerful supercomputer in the world. As the AI world turns.
No kidding. All right. And some other news, a new investigation has revealed that some of the biggest names in technology, including Apple, NVIDIA, Anthropic, and Salesforce, have used thousands of YouTube videos to train their AI models without creators' knowledge or consent. So this investigation was conducted by Wired and co-published with Proof News, and they found that subtitles from over 173,000 YouTube videos taken from more than 48,000 channels have been used in AI training. So this data set called YouTube Subtitles contains transcripts from a wide range of sources, and these include educational channels, news outlets, and popular YouTubers. Now, many creators were unaware their content had been used. YouTube's terms of service prohibit harvesting materials from the platform without permission. However, Several AI companies argue that their use of this data falls under fair usage. So, Paul, it's, I guess, unfortunately at this point, not really a surprise that some companies have used YouTube videos to train their models. This isn't the first time we've heard of this happening, but do any of the companies mentioned here engaging in this behavior surprise you at all?
Nothing at this point surprises me. I think that again, we don't have a ton of details here. But the way this generally works is like they can hire third parties who then use this
Right.
data, and it gives them a little bit of an arm's length to be able to say, we didn't necessarily know it was doing it. But I think that by now it's pretty common knowledge that YouTube videos and transcripts are being used to train. It seemed quite apparent. We talked, when Sora was first introduced by OpenAI,
Right.
and the CTO being asked and her saying, "Oh yeah, I don't know if we used YouTube videos." It's like, yeah, okay, we know you did. Like, everybody just admit that this is going on. Question then becomes, well, why doesn't Google, which owns YouTube, stop it? Well, because Google's likely training on them too, which is a violation of their own terms of use. So it just seems like a well-known secret that everyone is doing this.
Yeah.
And what does that mean to the creators? Like, who knows? Like, this is that. Again, there's every time we talk about innovation and how amazing this stuff is, we can't every single time stop and say, but they're training on stuff they shouldn't be training on. But that is the underlying story here that's going to
Hmm.
keep coming up, is how these models were trained, how they are trained, how they will be trained moving forward, and whether or not it'll end up being legal, how they did it, whether or not it is currently ethical. These are debates that don't really have an answer right now, but it's important for people to stay educated on what's going on.
All right, another kind of huge piece of news from this past week was a massive global IT outage that caused widespread disruptions to travel, healthcare, businesses worldwide. Now, this is, of course, what we've all heard of due to a defective software update from security firm Crowdstrike and largely affected Windows computers and systems. Now, even though this issue was kind of identified and fixed pretty early on Friday, the ripple effects really rapidly caused chaos. I mean, thousands of flights were canceled, hospitals were affected, shoppers were encountering the blue screen of death on self-checkout terminals, and even the Paris Olympics organizers reported issues with things like getting uniforms delivered. Now that companies are scrambling to pick up the pieces and get everything back online and repair the damage done from the outage, there's actually, Paul, like we've discussed, kind of a compelling AI angle here. So AI was obviously not involved necessarily in causing any of these issues, but there have been some interesting ways that people are using AI to pick up the pieces. Could you maybe walk us through connecting the dots here?
There was a couple of things we wanted to touch on this. So yeah, on the surface, not an AI story. There was obviously people start pushing rumors that the code was written by AI and
Mm,
that's what happened. There's no validation to that. Um, but I think for us, like a couple of things worth noting, how fragile our infrastructure is. So this is a single piece of code, wasn't a cyber attack, wasn't a hack of any kind, nothing nefarious. It was just a piece of code that was executed on Windows devices. And I believe they have 29,000 customers, I think is what I read. That's
mm.
just customers. And then some of those customers have tens of thousands of, devices that use Windows. So this single piece of code that was executed at like 4:30 a.m. On a morning, like Eastern time, is when I woke up at 6 a.m. and it's just CrowdStrike things everywhere. So that single point of failure can impact so many industries.
Yeah.
And so I think it's more important that people are aware how fragile the infrastructure is worldwide. This was not just a US based thing. This was everywhere. And as AI becomes more involved in the writing and editing of code, again, not saying it had anything to do with this, but more and more coders are relying on things like Copilot
Yeah.
to assist in the creation of code. And the question becomes like, do risks like this become greater? Like, is there a higher risk that these sorts of events start to occur more regularly, does it become harder for humans to monitor and discover errors if they become too trusting of AI's ability to do this? And that's the challenge we're going to have with all AI is like, if it gets to human level or beyond, and people just start trusting it to do the work for them, if it's in things like this where the risk is high of it being wrong, that imprecision we've talked about, that those little errors can have massive impact. So that's the thing I started thinking. I was like, wow, as we race forward in this future where AI is having more and more involvement in the creation of things, including code,
Hmm.
how does that play out when our infrastructure is so fragile? So that was the one. And then the other that you mentioned or alluded to is AI the answer to help fix this? So, not being an IT person, my understanding from having read some articles is the fix to this is largely manual. Like it
Yeah.
requires the rebooting of these systems and going through a series of tasks to fix them, which in many cases requires IT support to do it, which is why it may be weeks or in some cases months before all of these devices are so Cognition, an AI research lab building Devin, which we talked about on episode 88. So we'll put the link in the show notes to episode 88, where we talked about first AI software engineer. Devin came out with a lot of acclaim, didn't really live up to, what it was portrayed to be, but certainly a signal of where AI agents are going.
Yeah.
And so Cognition published a post. They said to test Devin's ability to help with something like this, we set up a Windows machine in a cloud environment with simulated CrowdStrike failure conditions. And then they played out like what they did. And they basically instructed Devin with a playbook of how to recover a machine, gave it the initial 8 steps, and then they let it go. And Devin was able to do it. And so their whole point was, listen, there's like hundreds of thousands of devices that need to get fixed. There aren't enough IT people in the world to go do this. Maybe AI agents are a way to actually
Right.
accelerate this kind of thing, not replacing IT people, but assisting and stuff like this. So, yeah, just worth noting because it was a major event that happened in the world that has relation to where we're going with AI.
All right, next up, according to reporting from The Information, Meta plans to release the largest version of its open source Llama 3 model on July 23rd, the day this podcast is coming out. And this is according to a Meta employee interviewed by the publication. The new model is 405 billion parameters, and this version of Llama 3 is also multimodal. This capability puts it in direct competition with all sorts of other advanced AI models on the market, with the notable exception that Meta's approach to AI is embracing an open source strategy. So in April, they had released 2 smaller Llama 3 models that we talked about, both of which were open source. And as a result, were quickly adopted by developers building solutions on top of these models. So, Paul, it sounds like if this information ends up correct, Llama 3 405B could drop the day this episode airs. Like, what does this kind of mean for Meta, for businesses, for open source as a whole?
Well, they're obviously pushing the limits of open source. We don't know that this model would be open source. That was an
Yeah.
unknown at the time,
Yeah.
so we'll find out. But I think it just continues to show the race is on. It's not just OpenAI and Anthropic and Google. Meta has a major say here. XAI, we just talked about with Elon Musk, has a major say. There's Mistral, there's Cohere, there's others,
Yeah.
and it's just this constant leaping of capabilities. But if they open source this, it would be a big deal. But I think this will also give us an indication of Meta's larger play into enterprise AI potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Are they actually going to try and make money? Are they going to try and build enterprise solutions for people? That'll be interesting to see when they do finally announce this, whether it's July 23rd or later date.
So, some other interesting meta news, they've actually decided to withhold the upcoming multimodal Llama model and future ones right now from customers in the European Union. So, Meta says that they are getting a lack of clarity from EU regulators. So, according to Meta, it's not just impacting their direct customers, but European companies won't be able to use these new models, even when they're being released under an open license. This could also prevent non-EU companies from offering products and services in Europe that use these new models. Now, we've talked a lot about EU legislation, but interestingly, Meta's issue is not with the EU's upcoming AI Act. They're more concerned with how they're allowed or not allowed to train models using data from European customers in compliance with GDPR, which is the EU's data protection law that's been in effect for quite some time now. Now, Meta claims that they had briefed EU regulators on their intentions to train these models on EU citizen data, giving them plenty of opportunities to opt out and notices, etc. Yet, it sounds like, at least from their side of the story, that EU regulators surprised them in June, telling them to pause training on EU data after Meta publicly announced that they were doing such training. So, Paul, do you see this becoming a trend? Should we expect to see more major AI companies start avoiding Europe without appropriate clarification on some of these issues?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, we saw this already last year with Google, where they didn't
Yeah.
release Gemini to 450 million citizens in the EU. I think there's just a lot of uncertainty around AI Act, and now that it's official, and I think it's like 180 days or something
Yeah.
they have, or maybe over the next year they have, as the regulations play out, people have that time to get in line. And I think a lot of these tech companies are just going to be uncertain about what exactly that means. And so I think we're going to probably see a lot of these slow playing rollouts or withholding things to get clarifications. And there's probably going to be a story about this every week related to one of these companies. So I think the interesting thing will be, what it does to innovation there. And I've seen a lot
Right.
of stories around just how hard it's going to be to build AI startups within the EU because of these. And the big thing, maybe we'll talk about this more next week, is in the US, what lessons are learned as we look at, more, tighter regulations,
Yeah.
and what the different potential administrations may do there.
So next up, the financial software company Intuit has announced a major AI-focused reorganization plan. So this plan includes laying off about 10% of their workforce. It's about 1,800 people, though they say they expect to hire at least that many new employees in fiscal year 2025, as they're basically focusing on reshaping their business as they incorporate AI into their products and services. Their CEO, Sasan Goodarzi, stated in an email to employees that, quote, companies that aren't prepared to take advantage of the AI revolution will fall behind and over time will no longer exist. So, Paul, that last quote kind of sounds very similar to things we've been saying for a couple of years. How do you look at this news fitting into the overall picture of like existing companies becoming AI emergent?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it before, but I wrote a blog post called "The Future of Business is AI or Obsolete" back in 2022, and this is exactly the premise, that every company is going to come to the realization, no matter what industry they're in, that if they don't become AI emergent, if they don't become AI forward and find ways to infuse it into their operations, their tech stacks, evolve their talent, they're just going to become obsolete. And depending on the industry, it'll happen over different time periods. SaaS this year, legal, healthcare, financial services, 3 to 5 years. Like it's going to vary by industry, but this is the inevitable outcome. And CEOs are going to realize it if they haven't already. And there's going to be massive pressure to do things like this. I think 2024, we'll hear sporadic stories about this. 2025, 2026, we're going to hear about this daily. Companies that are making massive shifts in their workforce because of AI. Again, I talked about this at length last week. I just think it's inevitable. There's only a few things that can slow it down, and I don't think any of those things are going to stop the wider spread application of this.
All right. So former OpenAI star researcher Andrej Karpathy, who we had just mentioned previously, has launched Eureka Labs, which is a company designed to create a, quote, AI native school. Now, basically, they envision a learning experience where students can work through high-quality course materials with the guidance of an AI teaching assistant that basically embodies the knowledge and teaching style of world-class experts. So they're looking to create a symbiosis between human teachers who design course materials and AI assistants who help guide students through them. They have also announced as part of this release their first product, which is going to showcase this approach. It is an undergraduate level AI course called LLM 101N. This course will teach students how to train their own AI, similar to the AI teaching assistant that's going to be teaching and shepherding the students through the course itself. They also plan to offer this course both online and in physical cohorts. Now, none of these courses are live yet. This is really just kind of an intro announcement previewing the company, but given the people behind it, definitely worth paying attention to. Paul, like how much of a need is there to kind of, this is like AI first education to create a total reinvention of education based on what AI is capable of?
My first thought here is, I mean, Andrej could literally do anything now. I mean, Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, Anthropic, start his own thing. I mean, he can name his price and go work anywhere in the world right now. So the fact that he's choosing to put his time and energy into education and training, I think is all you need to know about the importance of education and training, like we talked about last week and this week. So it just validates for me how important it is that we, prepare people. My initial look at the site, which is a single page, like I love developers, like it's just like 6 paragraphs. Here's what we do. Here's some links. It appears to be for technical audience. So this is not like you're a business leader, you're a marketer, you're going to go take this. This is like for developers. But the other thing to your question, I think what they do here, you're going to see their innovations trickle down into the future of education. Like as an organization that does education and training, I'm extremely interested in what they're doing and how they're doing it, because we're constantly saying, what is the next gen version of what we do? And so we will follow this very closely.
All right, very quickly, our last topic today is just a quick update from last week. So last week, we talked about how an HR platform, Lattice, their CEO announced that they were going to start treating digital AI workers within the platform just like human employees. So AI was going to be onboarded, given appropriate systems access, and have their work facilitated in all the ways that Lattice already does for human HR professionals. Now, many, perhaps most in the world of AI were both a bit skeptical and confused by the short announcement. It was like very light on details, pretty heavy on jargon. We were also skeptical and confused. And now the company has issued a retraction on the original post, backpedaling from its initial messaging and plan here, saying, quote, "This innovation sparked a lot of conversation and questions that have no answers yet. We look forward to continuing to work with our customers on the responsible use of AI, but we will not further pursue digital workers in the product." Paul, I can't say this is surprising, but it did happen really fast. Like, I know we were both very unsure of this to begin with. Like, what are your thoughts here?
I mean, one, kudos to them for realizing the errors in their ways. I think I said last week I didn't want to crush them for what was obviously a really bad idea. And, they did what they had to do and retracted it and just kind of like said, okay, we heard you. So good. The second thing and the final thing I'll say is like, there's going to be a lot of innovation in the AI space. There is a lot of hype, and you have to be able to see through that. So we try on this podcast to be as objective as possible about these innovations. So, obviously I wasn't a big proponent of Rabbit when that device came out. I kind of thought it was a scam, and it was. AI pin, just didn't see that playing out. It didn't. Like, we try really hard when we see something that we think is not legitimate or not like the best path forward, to be as again, as objective as possible, not overly negative. I think innovation is critical. People have to try and push the limits, but sometimes it's being pushed in the wrong directions. And this was a case of that. And I'm happy that they realized that very quickly and made a change in direction.
All right, that's a wrap on this week, Paul. Thanks as always for walking us through the complex, sometimes confusing, but always exciting world of AI.
Man, it's fun to dive back into the history sometimes, isn't it?
No kidding. I love it. Yeah, it's at least where it doesn't feel like drinking as much from a fire hose every week now that we're back to our weekly cadence.
Yeah, seriously.
But few quick final announcements. If you have not checked out our newsletter yet, go to marketingaiinstitute.com/newsletter. We cover more in depth all the news that we talked about here, as well as other topics we don't have time to get to. And if you have not left us a review on your podcast platform of choice, we would love if you could do that for us. We really take into account all feedback possible to make the show as good as possible and get it in front of as many people as possible. All right, Paul, thanks so much.
Thanks, Mike. We'll do it again next week. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks for listening to The AI Show. Visit marketingaiinstitute.com to continue your AI learning journey and join more than 60,000 professionals and business leaders who have subscribed to the weekly newsletter, downloaded the AI blueprints, attended virtual and in-person events, taken our online AI courses, and engaged in the Slack community. Until next time, stay curious and explore AI.